Hey, this is the Game Triple H from the WWE. You're watching RxMuscle.com, the truth in bodybuilding.
RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever's on your mind, bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, it is all on the table. So now bringing Dave Palumbo. Dave, yesterday again, after hours, another episode featuring Richard Rodriguez, some more stories into the heyday of his operations, Iron Addicts Gym, tying in some of the more high-profile bodybuilders during his heyday. So some more juicy stories that you got out of Richard Rodriguez really are out of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, gear busts over the last quarter of a century.
You know, Richard is kind of like a marketing guy, and he's really good at it. And he understood that if you threw money at high profile people, they would help promote your stuff, especially if you threw a lot of money at them. The ability to have that money to throw at people was because he was making, a ridiculous amount of money. I think at one point he said he was making $50,000 a day on selling steroids online, via his website, plus all his other little businesses he had. So it's kind of like one of those things. It's definitely going to make a good movie of the week, so to speak, that you're going to watch, because it's nice to watch the ride that he went on, because he had exotic cars, and there was other crazy stuff that you'll find out once he writes the movie. But I'm glad that it wasn't me, because I really didn't want to. I wouldn't want to have to do 5 years. It was probably very nerve-wracking. But he's got stories, and what I try to explain to him was these guys didn't really want to be involved with him, because they didn't want to be associated with the guy who sells steroids. But he was throwing such ridiculous amounts of money at them that they were taking the money and then trying not to necessarily be too involved with him. And he got kind of upset with a lot of these guys because of that. And the truth is, they just shouldn't have taken the money, but they were pigs and hogs, and they couldn't say no to the money. So most of them, he's got this adversarial relationship with them now, because he can't understand why they wouldn't be loyal to him. But at the same time, they were afraid that obviously being loyal to him, it would show that they had some kind of collusion with him. So it was this interesting dynamic that, it was, what someone won't do for a wad full of cash, and that's what it boils down to. But I think he's going to be very successful now that he's out doing things legitimately, because he is legitimately a good businessman.
So again, that episode of After Hours live now on the RX Muscle YouTube channel. Let's go to the first two questions. First two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, Clen, all the way through peak week, half the dose also on show day.
What I usually do with clenbuterol is that I'll keep it in pretty much up until that last week at the high level, unless I think the person's really, really lean and they just don't need as much, and I might cut it back. But assuming we're kind of peaking them perfectly for the show, and they still have maybe a pound or so to lose that last week, I'll keep them on it. And then the last couple days, maybe if they're doing a Saturday show on Friday and Saturday, I'll cut it back to 20 micrograms twice a day, so that they can carb up. And because clenbuterol can sometimes, because it's a mobilizer and increases glucagon production, which mobilizes carbs out of the cells. You don't really want that. So I try to keep the Clen lower while they're carbing up, but you can't really stop it, because then you get kind of a rebound. You can get a little watery looking. So I'll cut it back the last 2 days, and that seems to do the trick. Like I said, if the person's in shape and they're crazy looking a week out, I might cut it back to 20 micrograms twice a day the whole last week. But for most people, it's the last 2 days.
Second question, again from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Do you recommend liquid carbs day of contest if you have an issue holding stomach in with food? If so, what drink?
I wouldn't do liquid carbs, because liquid carbs is going to give you, you're trying to restrict fluids to stay dry. And then, yeah, of course, liquids are going to help you poop better and go to the bathroom, but you're going to get bloated from that. So we're drying guys out. We're not really giving them much fluids at all that last, the day of the show. So even carving up, if you give too many liquid carbs, I know some guys that will start the carving process on Wednesday or Thursday with some liquid carbs, but then they go to food. Liquid carbs get absorbed almost too fast sometimes, and maybe they can actually get malabsorbed because they go through you, and you're not absorbing all of them. So that's always a possibility, especially when you're using high amounts of liquid carbs, because they sometimes create a diuresis, and then they'll cause a diarrhea almost. So I find that food works better. Obviously, the day of the show, you have to eat, you're sipping fluids, maybe taking 4 ounces here, 2 ounces there, but you're really not drinking enough to warrant getting those liquid carbs down. I would just find a carbohydrate source that works well with your GI system. So like, I know people that can't eat rice, but potatoes work great for them. I know other people that potatoes don't work well and rice, but sweet potatoes work great for them. I know other people that like cream of rice. There are some people that can eat all the different carbs, and I'll vary it. So it really depends on what works, GI wise, and what doesn't cause bloating or doesn't cause irritation to your gut. And that's the carb source you can start with. I have a girl now I'm working with. She loves rice cakes, work well with her. And I'm usually a little reticent about rice cakes because they are so dry. Sometimes they can make you constipated because they suck fluid out of your body. But she seems to do well with them. And so it's working. So I'm having her use lightly salted, just plain rice cakes. So there's no rule in stone. It's what works for the person. And a lot of times it just requires trial and error.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us on Instagram, the handle is official_RxMuscle. If you're watching us for the first time here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our show segments, especially our live shows, in particular, Heavy Muscle Radio, mostly live now on Sunday nights. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. Let's go to Ivan Banyanats. Why do some bodybuilders who stay in really good shape year-round prep for 12 to 16 weeks, but they can easily be on stage lean in 4 to 6 weeks?
I struggled with that myself. I always liked to take a longer period of time to diet slowly. And toward the end of my career, I was doing 4-week diets because I was literally striated glutes all year round, but I wasn't really trying to get bigger. So for me, with my metabolism, if I wasn't overeating, calories, I tended to stay really, really lean. So for someone like me, it didn't warrant a diet. But if, even if guys have like 15 pounds to lose and it's like, oh, I can do it in 8 weeks. Well, why? Do it in 12 weeks, because if you do it slowly, you have the ability to have cheat meals and you have the ability to fill up, deplete, fill up, deplete. I always hate having to rush. And I've had guys that I work with that were almost in contest shape and we got 10 weeks to go and maybe they were panicking. I never, panic at that point. I'm just like, all right, every second to third day, I was giving them burgers and fries to eat. And they loved it. And their bodies actually responded really well. And I think they put muscle on because I was feeding them so much protein and I was giving them that cheat meal, but I was depleting them down and then was filling them up and depleting them down. And it just worked for their body. And when they got to the stage, they would like granite on stage. So the thing you can do and make a mistake with is if you're in shape at 8 weeks out and you don't feed the person, but you keep giving them cardio and you diet them as though they have to lose 25 pounds when they only need to lose 2 or 3 pounds. That's when you run into problems because that's how you can lose muscle. You might come in too flat. So you have to understand what the person looks like. There's nothing wrong with being ready early. That's good. That's a good problem to have because then you can kind of just have fun with it and feed them and take away and feed them and take away. And give them minimal cardio, and that I love helping people like that. That's easy, and they enjoy the prep, and they're like, "Wow, that was the easiest prep I ever had." So there's no such thing as being ready too early. You know what I mean? It's just you're gonna have to just adjust how you're eating and what you're doing cardio wise. You don't stick to the normal template plan as usual. You got to modify it and improvise, and that's what a good coach does.
We're getting a lot of questions about dieting down, so I'll take this one from Chris F93. Is it possible to keep any fullness when dieting down? And I guess what are your general guidelines for trying to maintain some level of fullness while dieting down?
You can't worry about being full if you're looking to maximize fat burning. So if I have a person who's like got a lot of body fat to lose and I have them on low carbs, they're going to be glycogen depleted and they're going to be flat. And and then they still have the body fat on them. So it's the dreaded, what I call fat and flat stage, where you look like absolute dog shit. Because at least when you were fuller, even though you had body fat, you kind of could see the muscle definition and the roundness. And then you carb deplete, and now you have the same body fat, but you're flat on top of that. So you look terrible. And that's the mistake people make. They say, "Oh, I got to eat more because I'm too flat. I look terrible." No, you're going to go through that fat and flat stage. Once the body fat levels start coming down, you're going to start seeing more definition and you're going to see your physique. If you weren't that fat and you were just depleted, you wouldn't look that bad. So don't get caught up in this whole thing. I need to be fuller. I need to be fuller. Now, if your body fat is super low, like we talked about in the last question, and you're flat and it almost looks like this person has nothing to burn, they may lose muscle. That's a different story. In those cases, you can feed those people more and every couple of days and fill them up so that they aren't too flat. But that person is a different situation because they don't have to lose a ton of body fat. But if you're dealing with a person who has a lot of body fat, or even, just what they should have for 16 weeks out or whatever it is, you start your diet, don't worry about being a little flat. That comes with the territory. You got to get used to it.
Hunter T. Coyle, if you're taking just test C, does it help your natural test levels come back if you taper down slowly off the test C before stopping it if you don't have a PCT?
Yeah, if you don't have a PCT, there's no reason not to have a PCT. Even if you used our Species Nutrition Testalized product, which will lower estrogen and DHT and help turn your body back on, that's the worst case scenario. If assuming you can't get HCG or you can't get Clomid or Nolvadex, you could always use Testalized. So there's no excuse. But tapering down, at some point you're going to stop the exogenous testosterone, okay, and your body is going to have to turn itself back on. So if you stop a long-acting testosterone, okay, let's say you're taking 1,000 milligrams a week and you stop it in 3 weeks, that 1,000 milligrams will be depleted. Over the course of that 3 weeks, your levels are coming down, right? So you're still tapering down because it's a long-acting testosterone. Now, if you were taking 1,000 milligrams a week of like a fast-acting testosterone, which no one does, okay, like Prope or suspension, and you just stop that, you're going to go from here to here. Then you're going to crash, and maybe your body wouldn't turn itself back on so fast. So to be honest with you, you really don't need to taper. Your body will taper itself if you're on long-acting injectables, and that's the advantage. That's why for most people, when I take them off, I say wait 1 week and then start your HCG. And 1 week really doesn't do much at all, but it brings your levels down a little bit, but you're still going to have drug in your system for the next 2 weeks. And that's just the way it goes. But that slow taper gives your body a chance to say, maybe testosterone isn't high enough. Let's turn LH and FSH on to stimulate those testicles a little bit. Meanwhile, you might have some HCG coming in, turning stuff on. Clomid is blocking the receptors for estrogen in your hypothalamus, which is turning on gonadotropic releasing hormone, which in turn stimulates the pituitary to release LH and FSH. So that whole cascade gets turned back on. So yeah, if you're using long-acting testosterone, you don't have to. There's no reason to taper at
all. Let's go to Placentia Fitness. We talk about testing for gear, right? Obviously, there's the Roy test for that. But as far as testing for supplement for protein in particular, how would you know if a protein powder is quality? Is it easy for companies to make a low quality supplement? So let's stick with the original question. I guess what would be the telltale signs maybe that protein powder is not quality? What should someone look for aside from obviously a lab test?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if you're taking a protein supplement that claims to be a whey isolate and you're getting gas and stomach distress from it, then they're probably lying, because that would mean there's lactose in it. Now, there are low-grade whey isolates that a lot of companies use because they're cheaper, but that tells you that they're using a lower grade quality. So how your stomach reacts is definitely will tip you off right away. How it mixes, if it doesn't mix that well, although sometimes people put stuff to thicken it up in there, so sometimes that's not necessarily a good way to measure, but definitely if it bothers your stomach. Now, some people are not lactose sensitive, so it might not bother your stomach. But I find that usually companies that have good reputations are the ones that you want to go after, because it's not that easy to take a protein sample and send it to a testing lab and have it checked, because those tests are expensive, and most people are not going to spend $300 to $500 to get their whey isolate tested. That's why when I tell people, you get what you pay for, you really do. And that's, the one thing that we really pride ourselves at Species Nutrition is producing the highest grade whey isolate that money can buy. That means that I go to these manufacturers, Glanbia being one of the biggest in the world, and I say to them, what is your highest yield whey protein isolate? It's also the most expensive, of course, and that's the one I buy. And every once in a while, they upgrade. They have another filtration process that improves it, and I'll buy that one. So that that's why our protein went from 27.5 grams of protein recently per serving up to 28, because we got a slightly better. And I know for most people say, oh, it's a half a gram. Well, you know what? I want the best. If I have a Ferrari, I want to put the best gas in it. If I could find a gas station that has higher octane, I'm going to put that gasoline so the car performs better. And so, you really do get what you pay for. And so some of the brands are cheaper. If you're going to go to like a Price Club or Sam's Club or BJ's, and you're going to see like a 5-pound sack of whey protein that's $25. To be honest with you, I don't even know how they get it that cheap, to be honest with you. I think sometimes some of these companies even sell their stuff as a loss leader where they're losing money. But even on something like that, they're using cheap crap in that protein. Look at Muscle Milk. I did that rant the other day on Muscle Milk. They use the crap. They say it's dairy free, and the first ingredient is milk, essentially. I mean, these companies have no scruples. They will lie. They will tee the line that the FDA gives you. Like the FDA has this thing also where they say if you put lactase enzyme into milk, you can say it's lactose free. I get news for you. Those lactase enzymes that you put into the milk, they don't digest all that milk, because I can tell you, I've tried those lactose-free milks, lactose-free. I almost poop my pants because there's so much lactose in this. So there are companies that will lie. So if you know that these companies have been caught before, and you know that the price is probably too good to be true, run. Stick with companies that are reputable. You want to put good stuff in your body. What's an extra couple of dollars? I mean, we waste so much money as it is anyway. Don't you want to put the best into your body? And that's what I've been trying to, educate people on for years. You get what you pay for. Stick with companies that put out the best quality products, even if they cost a few dollars more. You'll buy the designer jeans. You'll buy the designer, jewelry. You'll buy anything that a celebrity endorses. So why not buy the best stuff that you could put into your body? And it's a no-brainer, really.
Let's go to Mark DePaul. We've talked about the relationship between weed and bodybuilding. What do you think it is about smoking weed after a workout to relax? Is it beneficial at all?
Look, I'll never say that doing drugs, mind-altering drugs that also alter hormone levels in the body is good, okay, for bodybuilding, because it's not, okay? When I was, in my heyday of training, where I was putting on all my massive amounts of size for the 5 to 7 years I did it, the first, part of my career, I never had to drink alcohol. I never did any drugs whatsoever other than bodybuilding drugs, because I didn't want anything sabotaging anything I did. And that's not to say that you can't have a drink or you can't smoke, some weed if you want. I just chose to not put anything into my body that was not going to be productively building and repairing muscle. If you want to rationalize that weed calms you down, and maybe you have an anxiety disorder, which then that is beneficial to you. But I think a lot of people use it as an excuse because they want to do something that's kind of an escape. Now, having said that, I know guys that smoke weed on a regular basis that, because you would think if you smoke marijuana, that's going to make you want to cheat on your diet because it gives you the munchies. Guys who smoke weed all the time, it doesn't even make them hungry anymore, a lot of those guys. So some of these guys will smoke it like in the contest prep to kind of relax them and take their mind off of the food. Once again, I don't endorse that, when you're competing at the highest level, but for some people they need that, and it works, and it's functional. So I would never condemn it that, some people need it and some people do it and have good results from it. My suggestion is don't just smoke weed or start smoking weed because so-and-so IFBB pro does it. He might be in a completely different situation as you. Maybe he has an anxiety disorder. Maybe he has, stuff that's going on in his life that you don't know about. So don't just add drugs because you think, and I made that mistake. And so I'm not, Dan Duchesne, when I was coming up, was the big Nubane advocate. And he was like, oh, Nubane, it reduces cortisol levels. It'll help you train harder. It takes the appetite away when you're dieting. And he was right. It did all that stuff, but it was very addictive. And I was addicted to it for I was using it for 5 years straight. And then finally I just said, what, this is crazy. I know I like it. It wasn't like I wasn't like bankrupting myself on it, and it was a functional type of thing. I'm still working hard, but I'm essentially a functional drug addict. So I stopped it. It was brutal the first obviously week, but I never ever did it again because I realized that I was rationalizing the use of it, and it wasn't helping my bodybuilding. It wasn't helping my life. It was kind of making me a little lazy too, if anything, because it's like every time you just don't feel good or you don't want to do something, you just kind of take a shot of Nubane and it relaxes you. And I think that's what a lot of people do with weed. So if the drugs are making you, if weed is making you lazy and you're not, being the bodybuilder that you should be, not only in the gym, but business-wise too, then it's not functional for you. So you have to evaluate this on a person by person basis. And if it works and it's functional, great. If it doesn't, and you're just doing it because you think everyone else is doing it, that's a bad decision.
Take one more question from Robert Fitness Wellbeing. I know you love these cross-generational comparisons, but let's see. Okay. If you had Ronnie, Yates, Phil, Jay, and Haney in their prime, you could decide which year was their prime physiques.
Mm-hmm.
What would the order of their placings be? If you need me to repeat it, Ronnie, Yates, Phil, Jay, and Haney.
This is a great, comparison, because I personally think that, Dorian in 93 and Ronnie in 03 were the biggest, freakiest guys we've ever seen in the world. Ramy is just as big as these guys, but Ramy was never even close to as hard as these guys were. So I have to move Ramy right out of the equation. Phil is an absolute freak show of freaks. I mean, no one has rounder, freakier looking muscle, beautiful lines. But you know what the problem with Phil was? He's not big enough. So I think Dorian and Ronnie would have eclipsed him in that department. Jay is the only guy who could have stood next to these guys, size-wise and conditioning-wise. But let's face it, Ronnie beat Jay. So Jay is automatically in third place here. Haney's problem was that he came too early on, before guys weren't using as much drugs. And, he was already so far ahead of everyone. Had he been in the modern era, he probably would have been 25 pounds bigger. And he might have been the greatest of all time, but he wasn't. So we got to move Haney out of that also. So we have to say, physique-wise, not champion-wise, physique-wise, it's Dorian versus Ronnie, right? Dorian, definitely grainier and harder, probably a better poser and more intense on stage than Ronnie. But Ronnie's round muscle bellies, Ronnie's, just shape and structure, the amount of space he occupied on stage, it was just incredible. I mean, he probably would outweigh Dorian by 25 pounds. And so, in 03 versus 93, Dorian. So in my mind, Ronnie is the greatest of all time. So I have to give it to Ronnie, although Dorian would be a close second, because I think that Dorian would be a lot more impressive if you saw them in person next to each other. You can't watch videos of Dorian and get a true appreciation for how good he was and for how grainy and hard he was. But at the end of the day, I give it to Ronnie Coleman.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Again, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell. We have all new episodes of Heavy Muscle Radio after hours. And then, of course, tomorrow, all new episode of Iron Rage with Lee Priest. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next week.